a massive transfer of wealth during these lockdowns. There was only one candidate, me, who came out unequivocally against lockdowns. Unequivocally. Every other candidate, every one of them, Trump, Biden, even the idiot booby effing Kennedy, supported lockdowns. He may try to change history. And to make that very clear, I want to have one of our producers who's dug up some very important videos, Chris, because people need to understand Trump supported lockdowns, Booby supported lockdowns, Biden. In March of 2020, I was the only person running for president who came out vehemently against lockdowns. I gave solutions against lockdowns, but Booby, Biden, Trump all promoted lockdowns. If you don't believe it, let's play it right here. Suresh, can you kindly bring up the Trump example of Trump supporting lockdowns? Here we go. So I want to share with all of this is an actual video of Trump promoting lockdowns. Suresh, you got it?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay, so 1 second. So, Chris, the bottom line is the lockdowns destroyed working people's lives, small business people's lives. The big box stores, Walmart, Costco, Amazon, all these guys did enormously well because of the lockdowns. So the economy, the condition of the economy today can be traced back to the policies of both wings of the establishment. That's what we can trace it back to. So when they ask Biden if the conditions are worse today or better tomorrow, we have to look at over the long arc. Cost of living has been going precipitously upward. All right, Suresh, you got it? Okay, so let me play this to you. This is Trump promoting lockdowns. So Trump may try to change the reality, but this is Trump promoting lockdowns. Let's play it, Suresh.
Down, I could have kept it open. And I could have done what some countries are doing. I had to shut it down, and we did the right thing. I thought of keeping it open. And we did just the right thing. We closed it down, and a group of very smart people walk in and say, sir, we have to close it. And we did the right thing. They can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States. Even the Democrats aren't blaming me for that. We had to close it up. Some people wish we never closed it down. We did the right thing. We closed it. It's a decision for the President of the United States. And we did the right thing. We had to close it up because nobody's ever heard of closing down a country, let alone the United States of America. We had to turn off the airlines. We had to turn off everything. And we did the right thing. A lot of people have thought about it. Write it out. Don't do anything. Just write it out and think of it as the flu. But it's not the flu. It's vicious. We basically shut down our country. We did the right thing. We had to close it down. The President of the United States calls the shots, and we had to close it down. We did the right thing. They're not working in offices. They're not in airplanes together. And we did close up. We had to close it up, and we did the right thing. We closed it down. We did the right thing. We closed it up. We were told we got to shut it down, stop it, tell everyone to stay home because of this horrible virus, and we did that. We had to artificially close our country. We've done this right. And we really have done this right. That we did the right thing. Everything we did was right. I agree with a lot of what he said. So, it's interesting.
All right. So, Suresh, let's just want to do the lockdowns, right? This on the vaccine. Thanks. So, Trump was promoting lockdowns. Now, go look at what I did, Chris, in March of 2020. The lockdowns destroyed many, many people's lives. And I just want to share this to everyone because the good news is here's a letter that I wrote to Trump. And you can see the date on it. You see that, Chris? March 23rd, 2020. I wrote to Trump as a serious person trained in the economy, in immunology. I said, this letter provides your administration a solution to restore the immune and economic health of the American people. This solution can be executed immediately in a low risk and cost-effective manner. And I said the current trajectory of Anthony Fauci's public health policy will result in short-term and long-term destruction of the citizens' immune health, as well as our nation's economic health, perhaps a conscious and intended goal. And what I share here is I said Dr. Fauci's policy of one-size-fits-all medicine is from a fake science perspective, which Fauci has supported over 5 decades. I said there is no need to shut down our entire country. There is no need to quarantine all of our citizens. The solution herein provides a path to advance the immune health of our citizens while getting our people to work. And I encourage everyone to read this. In fact, I'm going to put this letter right up here so you guys can read my letter to Trump by Dr. Shiva in 2020. Okay. So I led, not like Trump, who was working for big pharma and big business and the elites. And you can see in this letter, I lay out very clearly that it is the overreaction of the immune system attacking our own selves from a weakened immune system that causes all these problems. It's not, some quote unquote virus. Okay. And I told Trump to organize our citizens into 4 groups. The people who really, had pre-existing conditions, fine, quarantine them. But the rest of the people, just give them vitamin D3. I laid out the protocol. This was hand delivered to Trump via Marla Maples, his ex-wife, delivered it to the executive office of the president. In fact, I spoke to them, so I know Trump got this. The bottom line is, Chris, that Trump did nothing. He promoted lockdowns, and it's right there in black and white. Now, not only did Trump promote lockdowns, so did Booby fucking Kennedy. And we have the evidence of that. Would you like to see that, Chris?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and here's a tweet. Here's a tweet that Booby Kennedy put up. So remember, Booby Kennedy literally copies everything I do because he knows we are the real change agents. He's part of the fake change agent grifter crowd. So here is Booby's actual tweet. We can zoom in a little bit. And what does it actually say? What does it say? Do you want to read it, Chris? It says coronavirus lockdown. Just as in slowed COVID, it reduced lethal air pollution associated mortality. When lockdown lifts, risks of status quo return and could worsen as government, what is that? Is that government?
As government weakens environmental regulations.
And pour billions into polluting industry. So here's Booby fucking Kennedy promoting lockdowns and tying it to the climate change scam. So he was saying lockdowns were good. It's going to stop the spread and it's going to save the climate. That was Booby Kennedy, worse than even Trump. And now he's talking a big game as though he was against lockdowns and that he would, and the lockdowns, Chris, destroyed $16 trillion in the US economy. That's what really happened. Now, what did Biden say? I don't want me to think that I'm just attacking Booby and Trump dog. Let's see what Biden said. And this is what Biden said, okay? Let's add Biden here. Okay, here's Biden. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead, Suresh. Here's what Biden said. Start from the beginning.
Coronavirus and the flu sworn in come January, and we have coronavirus and the flu combining, which many scientists have said is a real possibility. Would you be prepared to shut this country down again?
I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. That is the fundamental flaw of this administration's thinking to begin with. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. You have to deal with the virus.
So if the scientists say, shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists.
Sworn in come January.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I guess a quick question. He said we have to listen to the scientists. Dr. Shiva, I believe you're an expert in this subject. So yeah, he says trust the scientists, but they won't even let you have a stage to speak on.
Yeah, I have 4 degrees from MIT. I've won every major award, in the academic circles, from a Fulbright to the Elaranta Fellowship, many, many different awards in science. I'm a real scientist. None of those clowns. Booby ain't a fucking scientist. By the way, he plagiarized his own thesis. He had someone else write his thesis. Trump, I don't even think can write. And Biden says he has all these degrees, which he never got. So all these guys are charlatans. You're looking at somebody who actually got 4 engineering science degrees out of the #1 institution in the world. And it was because of my training, because of my hard work during the corona, quote unquote, pandemic, I wrote this letter to Trump. It's all right here in black and white, March of 2020, saying, do not shut down the country. Don't do it. You don't need to do it. And I gave a protocol which saved hundreds of millions of people's lives. Now, if leaders had listened to me, guess what? We wouldn't have lost $16 trillion And that's what we're suffering, Chris. So when they ask Biden about the economy, the bottom line is these people butchered the economy for the elites. And they did it consciously so they could print money for their friends. Most of that money that was printed went to Wall Street, and then they used it to pump up the stock market. This entire thing was a scam. So all I can tell everyone is when you look at this little graph that we have on our cards, you'll see there's something very interesting. See that graph there, Chris? What does that graph show? The red line shows that lifespan is going down, and the black line says cost of living is going up. Do you understand these people are killing you? They don't want you. They don't want you on this planet. And the only way out of it is to recognize we need to build a bottoms-up movement. So when you vote for me, and when people actually have the wherewithal to select real leadership, I'm going to tell you that I can't save you. The only way I'm going to quote unquote save you is give you the tools to learn how to build a bottoms-up movement. That is the only way we're going to end this economic catastrophe for working people, Chris. And that's my answer. If they'd asked me what they asked Biden.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to the second question posed to Donald Trump. Trump wants to impose a 10% tariff on goods entering the U.S. How do you ensure that this doesn't drive prices higher?
Yeah, so that was a question to Trump. You got to understand that the standard formula that they have, Chris, is quote unquote the left and the right. Okay. And what they've done to the American public is to create massive political confusion. So they present the Republican right as groups of people who are, pro-war, right? They want to go bomb everyone, but they're anti-regulation. Okay. And they present the left as people who are pro-regulation, anti-war. And then when an issue of abortion comes up, you see the Republicans wanting to regulate it and the Democrats not wanting to regulate it. So they create such political confusion that people don't even know what the difference in right and left is. So on this issue of tariffs, right? I mean, this is one of those other confusing issues, right? If you're a Republican and you're into free market, why do you want to create tariffs? We know that tariffs fundamentally do drive prices higher. And who gets screwed on this? Working people. But the bottom line is when they do tariffs and they do whatever deal they do, they forget that whether it's the elites in the United States or the elites overseas, they're all interconnected. They're going to make money regardless of what happens. The way that the monetary model works globally. We know for a fact that the Indian elites who have these companies in India or the Chinese elites, etc., where do they keep their money? The actual people. You know what? They're keeping it in US dollars. Okay? A friend of mine told me that, the premier of China has about $1 billion of his own cash in US dollars. Many of the Indian elites do stock buybacks and then they put their money in US dollars. So everyone thinks, oh my God, the US dollar is going to go down. No, it isn't. Because the elites of the world are in it together. So whether they do tariffs or not, ultimately who it screws, Chris, is working people. And Trump doesn't give a fuck about working people because he's never worked a day in his life, except work to manipulate people. So that's my answer. The bottom line is that the price increases, as we show in this graph here, right? This little graph. By the way, everyone can get these cards and you'll be able to distribute it out there. That black line is a curve going up. When you look at that black line, what you fundamentally see is cost of living is going up like this. And this is going on to working people all over the world, not only in the United States, but every part of the world. So the reality is that the policies that they do are intended to squeeze working people. If you look at the fact that lifespan is going down, they do not care for you. These people want to kill you. That's what this is about. So increasing prices is another mode for them, making it very, very difficult for you to survive. That's my answer, Chris.
Yeah, and I might add, it's also the policies of the left and the right that cause the companies to leave and go overseas, which now ends up in the situation where we have such a bad situation for our industrial production here at home.
Yeah, let me in fact share with you this graph here that you guys can all see here. I don't know. I don't know if you can see this graph here. So if you see this graph, do you see this graph, Chris? Yes?
I'm seeing thumbnails.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me stop here. Let me go to the right graph over here. So if you see this graph right here, what you see is that since about 1960 till today, lifespan is going like this, upside down, and cost of living is going like this. And if you look at this graph and you really absorb it and you want to be honest to yourself, the conclusion is they want to kill you. And the only way out of this is to shatter the swarm. And so I encourage everyone to go to shattertheswarm.com and watch this video. It'll take you about 10, 15 minutes, and I'll really explain to you what's fundamentally going on. And so that's what's going on, Chris. This is deliberate. So the question that they're asking Trump, is actually a very dumb question. What they should be asking is, why are prices going higher, and how many people do you want to kill in the next round? That's what they should really be asking him.
All right, we'll go to question number 3. Donald Trump was asked, many of your tax cuts are set to expire next year. Would you extend them with $1 trillion deficit and a growing debt? Why should top earners and corporations pay less taxes now?
Yeah, so let's talk about tax policy. I think that's really the fundamental question here. What should be a proper tax policy, right? But more importantly, underlying all of this, Chris, is that imperialism, which is what we're at, imperialism in the United States has gotten to a point where the elites have created a very unstable economic condition. So that's why they do these, one wing of the establishment lowers taxes, then the other wing raises taxes. And then they come and lower tax, raise tax. Because it's almost like if I had a pencil here, right? And I wanted to keep it up, right? It's very difficult. So you're going like this, right? Lower tax, raise tax, lower tax, raise tax, because the fundamental system is unstable. All right. And this is what we need to understand. And why is this system unstable? This is a root when you take a systems approach. The reason this system is unstable is that the preeminence of US imperialism is based on one thing. That's being the reserve currency. So the preeminence of the United States is based on one thing, being the reserve currency. What does reserve currency mean? Okay. Reserve currency means everyone in the world has to use your currency to buy goods and services. Okay. That's what the Ukraine war is really about. The Ukraine war is really about US and British imperialism destroying Russia, driving Russia into the ground. And if you really look at what's coming out of Russia, there's been a massive devastation that's being done to the Russian economy. The goal of the elites, the last imperial frontier for the elites, is Russia. Incredible amount of resources, oil, gas, minerals, close to 80, 90, potentially $100 trillion worth of resources in Russia. So the US must maintain its hegemony as the in order to maintain its hegemony, it must be controlling and be the only reserve currency. Well, how do you be the reserve currency? Well, if you're a vibrant economy and you have real economic back end, right? That's a natural thing. You have gold reserves, you have oil, whatever, right? But after 1970, we went off the gold standard, and more recently, we went off even the petrodollar. So the United States dollar is not driven by gold or oil. It's driven by an aircraft carrier. It's driven by F-15s and F-45s and, Space Force and all this kind of stuff, okay? That's what the U.S. economy is driven by. So that U.S. imperialism needs war. That's what U.S. imperialism needs. The U.S. imperialism needs war. And for the U.S. imperialism to survive and to be the preeminent economy, it needs war. And that's where we're at. So when you think about the foundations of what you just brought up, the fundamental questions here, about the deficit growing, the deficit, they don't care. Because the advisors to be a Trump or Biden or Obama, the latest theory is called modern monetary theory, Chris. And it says, don't worry about deficits. It doesn't matter. Just print as much money as you want. So anyone who's looking at this wonders, why are they printing more and more money? By design. Because the more money they print, guess what happens? For every dollar the US prints that's really not backed by anything, we subjugate the rest of the world. Okay? The working people in other parts of the world are slaves to the US dollar. And essentially, we're charging everyone a tax, a global tax. It's like the king, in the old days, who was a big feudal king, he charged everyone a little piece of money. And that's what's really going on when the US is able to maintain its reserve currency. And so this is, again, the people asking these very stupid questions to people know these are dumb questions. The question really to ask is, why does the United States keep printing money? Because they can. And the reason they can is because they have more aircraft carriers and more weapons. And that's what the economy is built on, Chris. It's built on subjugating the working people of the United States and subjugating the working people of the world. And this is why working people must unite. That's really the solution to this.
Yep, might makes right, and when it all comes crashing down, the stick comes and turns on its own people. So
yeah, and as a part of that, I think it's important to understand that all of these clowns have supported the Ukraine war. All of them. Now, many people out there may think, ooh, Booby Kennedy, he's anti-war. Bullshit. Booby Kennedy and his entire family are the biggest imperialists of the planet. It was John Kennedy, everyone must recognize, who started U.S. imperialism. He invaded every freaking country you can imagine. He's the one who really started the Vietnam War. He's the one who brought Kissinger in, who mapped out U.S. imperial policy. So I want, just to play this one video to people, if they don't know this, that everyone knows Trump wants to, Trump is obviously pro-war, right? But I want people to play this video about Booby Kennedy and talking about why he's pro the Ukraine war. Go ahead. And how he's so proud of his son going and fighting there. Suresh, do you have that?
Yes.
You're going to bring it up? This is not the one, right? That you're currently showing?
It is.
Okay. So let me show it right here. So here's Booby fucking Kennedy in his launch of his campaign, and you can see how he speaks with forked tongue. Go ahead.
Let's say that we are in the Ukraine for all the right reasons. My own son, Connor, I'm very, very proud that Connor joined the Foreign Legion and fought in the Ukraine and during the Kharkiv offensive as a machine gunner for Special Forces. Let's say that we are in the Ukraine.
Let's stop right there, Suresh. Let me just tell you, when I used to live out in Malibu, I've met this kid, Connor. He's a fucking drunken idiot, okay? That's what he is, all right? Complete delinquent. And, drunken stupor, okay? So when Kennedy talks about this, you see the Kennedys are always trying to make up stories for themselves, Chris, as though they're some heroes, right? So he's trying to take this delinquent. I'm sure it was engineered. They probably knew where he was, everything, But you can see if Suresh plays that again, he's very clearly saying we're in Ukraine for all the right reasons. Play it again.
Let's say that we are in the Ukraine for all the right reasons.
Play it again. Play it again, Suresh.
Let's say that we are in the Ukraine for all the right reasons.
Play it again. I
that
want
we
people to
are
hear this
in
over
the
and over again.
For all the right reasons. My own son, Connor, I'm
Thanks.
very to say that
So,
we are
this is the opposition to the stooges on stage right now?
Yeah, this is the opposition to Booby Kennedy. Booby Kennedy and the Kennedys are no opposition to the swarm. They are the fucking swarm. The only reason Booby Kennedy's running, Chris, as you and I know, is because I'm running. They had to create a fake version of me. And by the way, everyone knows that Booby Kennedy's campaign manager is a CIA agent, not just some CIA agent, but she's a CIA agent in the most clandestine unit of the CIA. And we have started to wonder why every time we do a Zoom call, the next day, my actual words are taken by him in his videos. You have to really wonder, because these people have access to all different kinds of surveillance. But the bottom line is, Booby Kennedy said, we are in Ukraine for all the right reasons. How is that different than Biden or Trump? It isn't. But go look at what I said. over the last several years. I was the first one to come vehemently against the events in Ukraine. I did an entire historical analysis how the United States created the coup in Ukraine, supported neo-Nazis. No one else did that, okay? Booby Kennedy is a fucking warmonger, period. And the reason they have to warmonger, Chris, is because they need to support U.S. imperialism so they can support the printing of money. And the more money you print, you fuck over the American people. That's what we need to talk about. So you print money. Now you can print money if you start wars. You start wars and you print money. It helps the elites and you screw over the American working people. And you're also screwing over the world's working people. That's how this all works. And that's called modern monetary theory. And modern monetary theory says, run up deficits, run up deficits. So again, these people were asking Biden and Trump questions. No, these questions are bogus. They don't ask the real questions. This is why they don't want me on the debate stage.
All right, we'll move on to another topic here. I'll wrap these two questions into one. Trump was asked, would you block access to abortion medication? And Biden was asked, do you support any legal limits on how late women should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
Look, on the question of abortion, here's a bottom line, okay? The bottom line is, as a biologist, let's just sort of keep it very, grounded. The reality is that anyone in biology will tell you a few days after the moment of conception, a life forms, okay? And there's been enough papers written on this. So the reality is that there is a real life. Now you can argue what the quality of that life is. Can it think? Is he a sentient being? And this gets into all sorts of religious discussions, okay? Or non-religious, philosophical discussions. But the bottom line is there's a being that's been created. So from a biological standpoint, the epithelial forms, which is separate from the mother, so it's a separate being, period. So that's over here. The second issue is the question of abortion, okay? Now, when someone decides to abort, they must recognize, based on what I just said, that there is a killing of life, period, okay? To deny that there is not a killing of life would be taking away from the material reality of what we're talking about from a biological standpoint. Now the question comes in the United States, how should that be controlled, right? Well, from a republic standpoint, the concept was that it should not be controlled at the federal level. The states should make those decisions. And that's the position that I stand with. This is really a decision for the states to do. Some states, because of, the aggregation of particular spiritual beliefs, they may decide a certain way. Other states may decide another way. But that's the way the U.S. Constitution was based. And that's my position on that, Chris.
I like a constitutional argument. So we'll go to the next question here.
Well, the other thing I want to add to this that's very important is that neither the left or the right, I don't believe, care about life of this child. Let me explain what I mean by this, and I want everyone to listen to carefully. It seems to me, doesn't it seem to be the so-called right wing who cares about, we got to have that baby. We got to have that baby, right? We don't want to kill the baby. Great. So if the Christian right is so concerned about that baby's life before it comes out of the womb, it seems they don't really give a damn about what happens after it comes out of the womb. Because if they did, why do they support companies like Monsanto? Why do they support companies like Monsanto? People have no regard for life. They're not pro-life, okay? Similarly, it seems like, on the other hand, the left wing claims they're concerned about some of these things, right? But they're also not concerned about life before the womb. But more importantly, both wings of the establishment are absolutely fine sending an 18-year-old kid off to Iraq to get killed on behalf of the elites. So I think both of these parties don't really care. The abortion issue is really not a real issue for them. It's an issue that they bring forward to act as though they care about a woman's body on one wing or they care about a baby's life. The reality is they neither care about women nor they care about children, both wings of the establishment. And you can see it by the fact over the last, as I brought up this graph before, what's really going on. Because if both wings of the establishment really cared about anything, you have to ask yourself, why is this curve like this, Chris? Why is this like this? Lifespan is going down. If you have a child today, the chance of your child living longer than you is no longer true anymore. If you have a child today, your child's lifespan will be shorter than yours. And look at the cost of living. This is a reality. So neither wings, and this has been going on since 1970. So neither wings of the establishment care about your children or women, either way. So it's all hypocrisy, Chris. So that's why I find it fascinating. They keep asking about abortion, but why don't they ask one question? Why is lifespan going down in the United States or globally? If they really cared about life, but they don't. They want to just create some issue so to give some weird distinguishing feature between the so-called left and right. That's what this is about. It's just pure propaganda.
Words and deeds. Always good to check and see. Just because someone says something doesn't mean they follow up with it. So we'll move on here to another topic. This one has to do with immigration. And so question was posed to Biden. Why should voters trust Biden to solve the immigration crisis? And then follow up to Trump is, does Trump intend to deport every undocumented immigrant in the United States? And if so, how?
Yeah, look, let's be clear. Anything coming out of Trump's mouth is WWE wrestling talk. Okay? Anything coming out of Trump's mouth is WWE wrestling talk. Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about what comes out of his mouth as long as it hits some chord of some naive, poor white working class or poor brown working class or poor black working class person that you can manipulate so he can pick your pocket. That's what this is about. And when I met with Trump those 2 hours, he was taking down notes fiercely. Oh, that sounds like a good point. I can use that in a speech. Okay? Literally. That's what he is. He's about looking for talking points that you can put out there that result in people giving him money. Okay? That's what this is about. And if you don't believe me, I want to take a quick break right now, and I want everyone to shortly listen to the entire video of Trump, how his words do not match his deeds. Now, similarly, if you go to Biden, why should voters trust Biden to solve the immigration problem? Here's the reality. On the left and the right, Chris, neither wing of the establishment wants to solve the immigration problem. Okay? Again, just like abortion, this is an issue they keep talking about. I mean, have you noticed? I mean, you could just literally play debate videos from 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, 16 years ago, 20 years ago, 24 years ago, 28 years ago. Keep going on. They're the same fucking questions. And nothing's ever resolved because all they are doing is they see, okay, there's 300 million people in the United States, 100 million households, 75 million people voting. We need to split them right down the middle. So we're going to have some issues for these people and some issues for these people. Pro and anti. I mean, isn't it amazing? All these elections are 46% to 46%. How do they get them so close, right? There's no distinguishing features. This is by design. They find issues that will literally split people. And the issue of immigration is one of those issues. But before we go to the Trump video, we need to understand at a very deeply fundamental level that U.S. imperialism is what resulted in people wanting to come to the United States in droves, right? Because U.S. imperialism is about destroying other countries' economies. That's what British imperialism was about. You rape other people. Some of it's done economically and other of it's done forcibly. In the United States, the US imperialism forcibly did this to the people of Latin America. The people of Latin America were forcibly subjugated. Forcibly subjugated. You know, there's a very interesting song called If I Had a Rocket Launcher, written by, I think, Cockburn. I forget the artist. It's a great song. You know, he goes down to Guatemala, this is in the 80s, and he sees this young kid whose mother was just butchered by the death squads in Guatemala, who was backed by the United States. And they used to come, these death squads in helicopters, and shoot the peasants in Guatemala. And this kid said, if I had a rocket launcher, I would kill somebody today. And so anyway, you can look it up. But what the United States imperialism has done throughout Latin America, I mean, it's genocide upon genocide upon genocide, from Chile to Guatemala to El Salvador to Nicaragua. You can see it. And by the way, all of this started with so-called peacenik Booby Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, all backed by the warmonger Kissinger. Okay? So all of Latin America was destroyed. So when those brown people want to come to the United States, yes, maybe there's some criminals, right? But the vast majority of those people are not criminals. Come on. Many of you right now use them to landscape your homes. Let's be honest. Many of you use these immigrants to clean your homes, your toilets. A lot of white people don't want to work these jobs anymore. Let's be honest. And then we vilify these people? That's not right. Here's the right way to solve immigration. And this is how you would actually solve it, but these guys don't want to solve it because one wing of the establishment uses immigrants for votes and the other one uses them to keep expenses low so stock prices can be up. Just ask yourself what would happen if the United States economy didn't have these quote unquote illegal immigrants. The expense line on most Fortune 1000 companies would be a factor of 5 higher. Their profits and their EBITDA would be much, much lower. Stock prices would tank. Let's be honest. So these people do not want to solve the immigration problem. They want to keep the immigration problem going to ask stupid questions during debates. That's what this is about. But if you want to solve the immigration problem, here's the solution. Number one, let's say there's 25 million immigrants who've come, quote unquote, illegally. Most of them who've worked hard, put them on a path to legal citizenship, but start taxing them. That'll generate another $1 trillion for the US economy. That's good. Obviously, the people are criminals and all those people, you let them go. But let's also find all the Americans who can work hard, who are scamming off disability, and tell them to work or send them to one of these other countries. Let's do both types of immigration. And that's the right way to do this because you have a lot of people who are scamming, quote unquote, Americans, white, black, brown, who are scamming off the system. They don't work. And then you have these poor immigrants who are coming here willing to work. So you want to vilify them? Bullshit. That's not the American way. That's not human. So again, none of these people want to solve the problem. I do. And by the way, Congress is the one that solves the problems. Notice Congress will start doing some bill and then suddenly they'll go on recess and vacation and to Aspen to ski. Then they'll start the next session, start up again. They never solve the problem because they do not want to solve the problem. That's what people need to understand, Chris. By the way, if we can take a quick break, and I want everyone to see this video. You know, people ask, you know, anything Trump says, it's bullshit. You can't listen to anything he says. So let's bring up this video. And I just want everyone to, you decide if anyone here should be thinking Trump's their savior. Obviously, Joe Biden's, you know, the issue is Joe Biden and Booby Kennedy have an excuse. One guy's got worms in his brains and the other guy's brain is mush. But you got to ask, what is Trump's problem? And let's play this video.
I will say this. Hillary Clinton has to go to jail, okay? She has to go to jail. I think she should be in jail for what she did with her emails. But if I win, I am going to instruct my attorney general to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation. Special prosecutor, here we come, right?
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Donald Trump wins the presidency.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton, and I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard.
But in a meeting today at the New Times, where reporters were live tweeting the conversation, Mr. Trump said this when asked about prosecuting her. I don't want to hurt the Clintons, he said. I really don't. She went through a lot and suffered greatly in many ways.
And Bill and Hillary, and they were going to Michigan. No, it's okay. No, forget it. That plays great before the election. No, we don't care, right? That plays great before the election. No, we don't care, right? That plays great before the election. No, we don't care.
This man is playing you for a fool.
Companies, and this is why they're so desperate to make sure you get jabbed and poked and jabbed and poked and jabbed and poked. You're going to see why. Follow the money. Take Pfizer. In 2011, they made $65 billion in revenue. In 2020, they only made $41 billion. They lost $25 billion in revenue. Pharmaceutical companies are tanking. They're not doing well. And you can sue a pharmaceutical company. They're saying, my revenues are going down with pharmaceutical drugs, which are single molecule drugs. But this jabines, this jabination stuff, hey, that's pretty good. I can't get sued. It's growing at 17, 20% per year. Big margins. I don't even have to do the same level of testing. Pharmaceutical drugs have to go through in vitro, then you have to do animal testing, then you have to go to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But thank you to Operation Warp Speed. So they could circumvent a lot of fundamental testing.
Operation Warp Speed to shorten the vaccine development timeline.
And I've always felt it was the most important is the vaccine. I would recommend it, and I would recommend it to a lot of people that don't want to get it. And a lot of those people voted for me, frankly, but it's a great vaccine. It's a safe vaccine, and it's something that works. And we've been working round the clock, and what I got the FDA to do, this would have happened. This would have happened in many, many years from now if I didn't get involved and if we didn't get involved. What I got the FDA to do.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. 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 They got oh! And I'll be there with you. 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 We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Now Congress has certified the results. We will never give up. We will never concede. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. We will never give up. We will never concede. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
All right, I wanted to play that video for everyone because when we look at the answers that Trump makes, Chris and everyone listening, you have to understand the guy is an actor. He was selected by the Rothschilds. It was Wilbur Ross who bailed him out. All of this is public information. And then he was put on a trajectory to become president. Elections are selections. It went from Obama to Trump to Biden. And the bottom line is, Chris, their entire goal here is to do this beauty pageant that they do every year to figure out who can con the American people the best. And whoever gets to con the people the best and keep them distracted from not building a movement, they get to be president, Chris. That's what this is about. That's all this is about.
It's incredible. So with that, we'll keep moving along. We're a little bit behind here. So moving to more foreign policy stuff. Putin's terms for ending the Russian war in Ukraine are acceptable to Trump. Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed, and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think this question is where they asked Trump, are Putin's terms for ending Russia's war against Ukraine acceptable to Trump, right? That's what they asked Trump. Is that right? And in that, what Putin said was Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory as already claimed, and Ukrainian abandons its bid to join NATO. So first of all, let's be clear. The people of the eastern regions of Ukraine, I think Luhansk, Donetsk, forget the other region, those people voted in a referendum to join Russia, okay? It was 98%. It's not Russia went and claimed that land. Let's go back and unwind this so we really understand there's nothing that Russia is giving up. In the general policy, which is included in the United Nations Charter, is that every country has, or a people of a country have the right to national self-determination. If a people of a country believe that ethnically, linguistically, philosophically, culturally, they do not belong to a particular land, that they don't feel a part of it, they have the right to peel away. It's called the national right to self-determination. So they had a referendum in those regions in the eastern part of Ukraine, and those regions wanted to be part of Russia. That's what really happened. And if you look at the reality, Putin wasn't sending them any weapons, anything, until those people wanted to be part of Russia. So there's nothing here. The whole basis of this question is nonsense. It's not like Russia is claiming land. These people wanted to be part of Russia. Okay? It's like, imagine Ontario and Toronto, or parts of Toronto and Montreal and parts of Canada said, we don't feel any connection with the Canadian people. We feel more connection with the American people, and we're basically Americans, and they wanted to be part of the United States. And they had a referendum, and the UN would theoretically recognize that. And it would be wrong for anyone to say, oh, the US is claiming that land. No, those people wanted to be part of the United States. You see what I'm saying, Chris? So that's the first thing that we need to understand. And as I talked about right at the outset of this Ukraine-Russia war, the bottom line is that in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, a verbal agreement was given by the United States to Gorbachev that we would not move 1 inch east of Germany. NATO would not. We equals NATO. Okay, let's be honest. But the United States and NATO proceeded to move, literally trample that verbal agreement. Putin says to this day that Gorbachev was, frankly, an idiot for not getting this in writing. And Gorbachev was an idiot. That's why many people say Gorbachev was a US agent. And it was a CIA coup that actually took place in the Soviet Union, probably true. So you've had, for centuries, the golden jewel for many of the people of British imperialism has always been Russia, of the vast mineral, of the vast resources it's had. So Putin, being a Russian nationalist, he didn't like this approach. In Ukraine, there was a period of time when there was a pro-Russian leader of Ukraine. The United States caused the maiden coup in 2014, engineered by Obama and Hillary Clinton and John McCain. And they put in their own people. And that was really the beginning of this. And the reason all of this took place was for US imperial interests to start mining the oil and the gas reserves in the eastern part of Ukraine, build a pipeline to compete with, as Condoleezza Rice said, the Russian platform. Condoleezza Rice laid out the theory in 2013, we must make sure Europe is no longer reliant on Russian gas and oil. That was a goal. So all of this was engineered for monetary power profit control. And Putin saw this, and that's why they started kicking out of many of the US oil companies out of the eastern region. This is where it all comes down to. This is all of the fact that the United States policy of hegemony was to make sure that Europe, Germany was no longer dependent on Russian oil and gas. That's where all of this begins, Chris. And that's where all of it actually ends. So now the elites are sitting around thinking, what do we do? Okay, maybe we end a war with Russia. We'll give Russia the eastern part. We'll take over the western part. And there's actually been discussions that the western part will be divvied up between countries like Poland and a couple of other countries. You see? It's called the spoils of war. But none of this is about the people in that region, the working people, right? So when Trump talks like this, he's still speaking with an imperial approach. It doesn't matter whether some people want to end the war or whether they want to end the war by splitting it. It's still nonetheless about having more and more US imperial encroachment into the former Soviet Union, Russia. And the reality is that we're looking at the fact that the working people of Russia, the working people of the United States, the working people of Europe have no interest in any of these wars. Because who's getting butchered there, Chris? It is poor Ukrainians, poor Russians, right? And poor American working class people who go fight these wars, not the elites. So I think this war doesn't really benefit anyone, and any type of divvying up, I don't think ultimately it's just a temporary solution, because it doesn't address the fundamental issue of the fact the US reserve currency is dependent on war. And how do we get ourselves off of that? And the only way that's going to happen with someone like myself and working people leading a bottoms-up movement.
I completely agree. Let's move on to Israel-Palestine. What additional leverage will Biden use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? And then a second question to Donald Trump. Would Trump support the creation of an independent Palestinian state to achieve peace in that region? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, right.
Right. I think, look, I think the most important thing to understand here is that just like I distinguish myself in any one of these other positions, Chris, I distinguish myself uniquely in this position on Zionism, as many people know. But I think to remind everyone, I think it's important that I think it's important to, sometimes it's good to, instead of me saying it once, let me say what I said right after the October 7th event, which was, by the way, a complete psyop. Everyone can do a little bit of Googling and find out, a little bit of research. It is Israel which funded Hamas for many years through Qatar. And to think that this war, quote unquote war, which it isn't, it's a genocide, right? This Hamas sort of takes hang gliders and comes into Israel without no one detecting it is absurd. Okay? So I was the first one to point this out right after October 7th. I was the first one to educate people on the fundamental difference between being anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. Zionism is fundamentally a political ideology, no different than Nazism. I was the first one to educate hundreds of millions of people on the fact that Zionists and Nazis collaborated to butcher Jews. And that was, you know, in November and December. Shortly after many of my videos went viral, it was US Congress which passed a resolution that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. That resolution, by the way, passed on December 6th by a Zionist hoodlum by the name of Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House. That resolution comes literally out of Trump's executive order, which he passed in 2016. Okay? And then more recently, the US House of Representatives, you know, in a vote of 300 to 70, said that going into the future, that the definition of anti-Semitism will be taken from the Israeli Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which says if you say anything against the state of Israel, that's anti-Semitic, basically equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. That's what they've done. And all of this was done because the work that I had done broadly was educating hundreds of millions of people in the United States everywhere. There's a fundamental difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and they don't want that. They want to, you know, meld all of that together. And to make this eminently clear, let me just share with everyone the video I put out. In fact, Chris, I think this was during the Republican primary. You asked me a question.
Indeed.
And this was a answer to that question I had that I'm very, very proud to say that I answered the question in the following way.
Are we waiting on Suresh?
What's that?
I'm just looking at a screen. It's not playing.
Oh, you didn't see anything, Chris?
Not for me, at least.
Oh. Okay, let me play that again. Sorry. So just to repeat, you can let me repeat that again. Let me play that. Share screen. This. So maybe I have to play it this way. Chris, tell me if you see anything now. Do you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Tell me if you hear it now. By the way, this was the question I think when Chris asked me in let me every presidential candidate except
We can hear it.
Zionist hawk. That may not sound presidential, but in fact it's very presidential because I represent the American worker who does not want us to be cocksuckers of Zionism. Donald Trump sucks Zionist cock, Nikki Haley sucks Zionist cock, Vivek the Snake sucks Zionist cock, Chris Christie, Booby fucking Kennedy, Joe Biden, all of these people. The only people that don't suck Zionist cock are the American workers who are being screwed. I'm an American worker. I'm one of us. But Donald Trump is no different than any one of them. They all serve Israel. Bernie Sanders, for example, is an Israeli citizen. Anthony Blinken is an Israeli citizen. The head of the CDC is an Israeli citizen. All of these people are Israeli citizens. All of these people work together against the American working people. There's a lot of liberal Zionists who are out there saying, ceasefire, peace now. I've seen that for 40 years. It doesn't get us anywhere. All that ceasefire does is let Israel pull back, then go bomb the shit out of the Palestinians again. The only way to end this is we must end the occupation. Ending the occupation means beginning with ending the occupation of America by Zionism. Zionists have taken over for every seat of power of the United States. If we're going to free Palestine, we must end the occupation of America by Zionism. If there's anyone who should get military aid, it should be the Palestinian people. I'm not talking about Hamas, by the way, all those morons who think Hamas represents the Palestinian people. Hamas was created by Israel. When you see Hamas, replace it with Israel. We need to build a bottoms-up movement. Go to shivaforpresident.com and volunteer. All right. So that should be pretty clear, Chris, where I stand on this issue. And I think it's very, very important for people to see the contrast. And I think the contrast, we have Suresh is going to cue up the position on Booby effing Kennedy. Booby effing Kennedy, as we've shown here, is a Zionist hoodlum. He's as Zionist cocksucking as you can get. And if you don't believe this, Booby effing Kennedy actually believes that the Palestinian people are the most pampered people on the planet. Can you believe that? And if you don't believe this, this is what he said. And this is word for word from Booby Kennedy. All right, here you go. And this is why you need to really recognize how disgusting, you know, this person is, and why his throat sounds the way it is. Because
he's a guy from Malibu,
huh?
Saying the Palestinian people are pampered. That's ballsy.
Yeah, this is Booby Kennedy. Go ahead.
You talk about solutions for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations.
Are you kidding me?
No,
Even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, you know, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming
it? In part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor, first of all, Israel has no obligation. The Israel gave. You talk about solutions for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations.
Are you kidding me?
No,
even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, you know, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming
in part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor,
he's not used to getting any pushback. He was like,
yeah. So there you go. Thank you, Suresh. So the bottom line is, I hope everyone understands, I'm the only presidential candidate, as I mentioned, who is not part of this club. Booby, Biden, Trump are all Zionist cocksuckers. And the American people are not Zionist cocksuckers. And to the liberal elites out there who talk about freeing Palestine, they don't really want to free Palestine, because if they did, we'd have to free America by ending the occupation of Zionism here. And then finally, Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. We have to understand, in Germany, it was the Zionists who collaborated with the Nazis to butcher Jews. And this is why, Chris, that the Congress of the United States is so adamant now of confusing people to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Because the work of our movement and the work I was doing was to clearly separate that and educate people, which we were very successful at. And once enough people in America realize this, it's going to be the end of Zionism, and you can actually start really making substantial progress towards peace in the world, because it's not going to be driven by a small set of people based on a chosen people's model, which is what Nazism was based on, which is what Brahmanism was based on. So let's listen to Trump. Now, Trump isn't any different. Trump wants to go and wipe out all the Palestinians. Here we go. Let's play this. This is Zionist hoodlum number 2, okay? So let's listen to Zionist hoodlum number 2.
The oil.
Would you still send aid to Israel right now?
Look, we've always got to protect Israel, in my opinion. They've been, you know, they're amazing people. What they've done is, it's an amazing thing, and they've been loyal to us. The oil.
Would you still send aid to Israel right now?
Look, we've always got
say that to the people of the USS Liberty.
They've been, you know, they're amazing people. What they've done is, it's an amazing thing, and they've been loyal to us.
Always been loyal. USS Liberty, anyone? Anyone?
Yeah. So I think the key thing to understand is there is not that much difference at all between at least Trump and Biden right here. Okay. Someone says, you know, I just want to put this out there. Some individuals saying that we're not on the ballot anywhere. Well, let me just tell you that. So let me bring up this person. You are not on the ballot. No, false. False. Let me show you right here. And this is right off. We're on the ballot right here. If you want to see this, right there. See? Cornel West, Shiva Ayyadurai, Joseph Biden. There it is. Election candidate, U.S. president. Okay? There we go. So we need to make people understand that, yes, I am on the ballot. Okay? And if you guys want to help, you can help us get on the ballot in many other states. Now, we also want to make a point about, I think, Biden. Where does Biden stand on Zionism? Let's listen to Biden. This is Joe Biden talking about his position on Zionism, and you'll see what a Zionist hoodlum he is. Let's play that.
It's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
The second part is people should understand by now, this should be crystal clear, that Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East. I always say to my friends when they say those things to you, I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed? You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Progress occurs in the Middle East when everyone knows there's simply no space between the United States and Israel. There is no space between the United States and Israel when it comes to Israel's security. There is only one nation in the world that has unequivocally, without hesitation, and consistently confronted the efforts to delegitimize Israel. At every point in our administration, at every juncture, we stood up on behalf of legitimacy of the state of Israel.
The security of Israel and the United States is inextricably tied, and we will never, ever, ever abandon Israel out of our own self-interest.
I also emphasize what I've said throughout this conflict. The United States fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against indiscriminate rocket attacks from Hamas and other Gaza-based terrorist groups that have taken the lives of innocent civilians in Israel.
All right. So, Chris, you can see a fundamental difference. You have all of these people are rabid Zionists. Trump, Biden, Booby, all rabid Zionists. So it's quite interesting. Booby's acting like he's some anti-establishment guy. He's not. He's as Zionist as you get. Biden, at least, is extremely honest about his Zionism. He says it very clearly that we would have had to create an Israel if Israel did not exist. And this is a centerpiece of it. British and U.S. imperialism used Zionism, used this very anti-American political ideology to create Israel because they needed an aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And that's what Israel is for U.S. and British imperialism. Now, the Jewish people are being manipulated into the Zionist framework. And by the way, the most number of Zionists in the United States are Christian Zionists. 70 million Christian Zionists in the United States. So there's far more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. There's Islamic Zionists. Just ask the House of Saud, okay? So you do not need to be Jewish to be a Zionist. Again, the fundamental difference between me and all these other candidates is they do not care about the American people. They care about supporting this aircraft carrier in the Middle East called Israel. Again, why? Because they need that aircraft carrier to print money, the reserve currency. That's where it all comes down to. Because now you can print money, you can create deficits, and you can print money for your fellow donors who support you. That's how the entire U.S. economy is being run. It's being run by printing of money and driving working people into the gutter.
Well, that was very enlightening to see all their positions. Biden's really, he's really pro-Zionist.
Well, they all are. They all are. You have to understand, you have to give it to Joe Biden. At least he's being very, very honest. Okay.
Just came out and said
So
it.
at least he's being very, very honest. Now, the fundamental difference is, you see, none of these people have any regard for connecting what they do in their private lives to their personal lives, right? They lie and they cheat. We just saw Trump with the swamp video. But I have to let everyone know there's a wonderful clip that I found with his interview with Megyn Kelly when she asks him about all of the infidelities in the Kennedys' lives, in their personal lives. And this is what Kennedy had to say about that. He actually tells people that your personal integrity and your public integrity can be two different things. That you can be an asshole in your personal life, but you should be regarded as a saint in your public life. And here it is. Let me play this for you so you understand the quality of people that you're getting.
Herschel Walker's been in the news, and his personal life is what's been in the news. And if the reports are true, and he denies many of them, he hasn't been a particularly great dad to the children that he's had and his various girlfriends have had. And he hasn't been a particularly good romantic partner. And there's a debate in the Republican Party about should it matter, because they really want control of the Senate, and they would like to overlook those foibles. And of course, Raphael Warnock has some of his own, his opponent. But I wonder, as a Kennedy, you're kind of a good person to ask, since we now know JFK had, a long line of reported affairs when he was married. And, had we zeroed in on those back then in the country the way it was back then, that might have made a difference politically. Obviously, Ted Kennedy, Chappaquiddick, a whole other story. So what's your opinion? Should it matter if Herschel Walker has other kids who he fathered but didn't take care of? If he got a woman pregnant and paid for an abortion for her, and then wound up being staunchly anti-abortion, and so on. Should it matter, or should it just matter how the person's going to vote?
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I think people. Well, I really can't answer about whether it should matter or not. I mean, I think there's there's personal integrity and there's public integrity, and that they're two different things. And a lot of people voted for Donald Trump because I'm not believing that he had an exemplary personal life. But willing to overlook that because he was bringing some other things to the table. So I'm not going to say whether people should be concerned about that, about people's private lives.
All right. So, I mean, he says it very point blank. I know we have another question we want to go to, Chris, that you want to ask me about Trump going after his political opponents. But everyone, please recognize that if you can look at my life and the life of real leadership, my life is pretty much out there in the open. And there is a direct line between my personal and my private integrity. They're not two different things. I'm not like the asshole Shiva at home and the nice Shiva out in public. Who I am is who I am, Chris. These people aren't who they say they are. And they're convincing people that it's okay to be like that. So your leaders will reflect your consciousness. If that's the kind of people that you want, and you have to understand, someone like Booby and Trump and Biden, these are not nice people. And you're expecting them in the public life, why should they be excused? And you have Kennedy openly telling you your personal integrity and your public integrity doesn't matter. I also want to let people know that they try to make the Kennedys look like they're some martyrs or something, if you notice, right? The JFK files, the JFK files. I think what they should really release is the Marilyn Monroe files. Who killed her? The work of Maureen Callanan says it was likely the Kennedys themselves who knocked her out. So we have to understand that these people are organized criminals. They're not good human beings. And why do you think they care about you? And again, I can't keep in, pointing this out over and over and over again. Look at the data. These people are killing you. They hate you. Since 1970 or earlier to now, lifespan is going down. Cost of living is going up, whether it's Republican or Democrat or independent. Okay? Fake independence. None of these people are working people, Chris, like you or I or the people listening here. They are people of the swarm, and the only way out of this is to build a bottoms-up movement.
Exactly. And people often ask why these people have so many large houses all over the world. It's because they need a lot of closets to hide all their skeletons. So we'll go to question 12 here. What did Trump mean when he said he would have every right to go after his political opponents if elected?
Look, again, it comes down to this fundamental issue. Again, in the debate, they asked him this question. What he's really saying is that all of this is just theater, Chris. This is all just WWE theater. If you go back to the video we played, nothing that Trump said that all sounded dramatic did he do anything. He didn't do anything to Hillary Clinton. He locked up his own opponents. I mean, his own supporters, who he didn't even pardon. He talked about big game fighting against Fauci. What did he ultimately do? 12 hours before he left office, he gave Fauci a commendation award. Let's not forget this. 12 hours before he left office, he gave Fauci a commendation award. Right? He said before his campaign he was against Big Pharma, his political opponents. What did he do? He took $1 million in from Big Pharma for his inauguration. Everything that comes out of his mouth, or Booby's mouth, or Biden's mouth, Biden in some ways is much more honest. I mean, you saw in the Israel video, you can at least, he's telling you, I'm a rabid Zionist. These other people act like they're anti-war or they're for the people, right? That's why they have Trump and Booby out there, to manipulate people so we don't build a bottoms-up movement. And that's the entire game of Trump. So these people say one thing and they do another. And just to give you an idea, Booby Kennedy, all these dumb mothers who think he's for medical freedom, whose money he rapes, among other things he's done to rape people, okay? They think he's against vaccines, right? That's what everyone thinks, until one of my, very young, smart, young gentlemen found this video and he gave it to us. Okay, it's on rfkexposed.com. Everyone should go listen to it, but let me bring it here. And this is this video of where Kennedy actually stands on vaccines. Go ahead, Suresh.
Minister Farrakhan has asked me to address the issue of vaccines and African American and vaccine safety. I want to start out by saying this, and I want to say it emphatically. I am pro-vaccine. I have always been fiercely pro-vaccine. I had all 6 of my children vaccinated, and I believe that we ought to have policies that encourage full vaccination for all Americans.
Let's play that again. People need to
hear.
Play it again.
Mr. Farrakhan has asked me to address the issue of vaccines and African American and vaccine safety. I want to start out by saying this, and I want to say it emphatically. I am pro-vaccine. I have always been fiercely pro-vaccine. I had all 6 of my children vaccinated, and I believe that we ought to have policies that encourage full vaccination for all Americans.
And you can mail your check to Malibu in California.
Right. And you have to understand, this guy has manipulated the bourgeois white liberal working class as though he's for medical freedom. Somehow, and if you listen to the whole video, he goes on to then rail against the CDC and the corrupt government. And then somehow he's going to get this corrupt swarm to create quote unquote safe vaccines. So the guy admitted he has worms in his brain to basically attempt to probably excuse himself for making these kinds of comments, but this is what he's about. And this is no different than Trump. At least Biden, says, I'm going to screw you. He says it very directly because his brain doesn't have these worms. It's just mush. So he just tells you very directly what he's going to do. He has basically no guard. Trump is pure actor. So Biden will tell you what he's going to do and he'll go do it. Booby speaks with forked tongue, and Trump will manipulate you any way you can to take your money. That's what this is about. but all of them are Zionist cocksuckers. That's what everyone needs to understand. All right, Chris, how many more questions do we have? Let's take a few more from the debate.
We can run through them real quick. And this question kind of exemplifies what you were talking about earlier, how they perfectly position these candidates so that the country is divided in half. So Biden was asked, does Biden believe that tens of millions of Americans who will likely vote for Trump will be voting against U.S. democracy? Look at how they perfectly position that to divide Americans.
Repeat that question again, Chris.
Does Biden believe that tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for Donald Trump will be voting against U.S. democracy? It's positioning
right
half the country against the other.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So it's asking as though Biden is for democracy and Trump is against democracy, or vice versa, right? When you really look at it, let's all be honest, less than 48 hours ago, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in favor of Biden, which was Biden versus Missouri. They changed the caption of the lawsuit to Murthy versus Missouri. But the bottom line is that this is where people need to understand all of these guys are in it together. The Supreme Court, the conservative Supreme Court, voted in favor of Biden, the quote unquote liberal Biden. And they threw out the lawsuit done by a bunch of numbskulls who purposely, intentionally concealed my lawsuit in that to weaken that lawsuit. And that lawsuit was the fact that, if you remember in 2020, Chris, I had discovered that the government has a backdoor portal into all social media companies. And this backdoor portal was created to silence the speech of Americans silently through laundering censorship. Now, this is absolutely against the First Amendment. And it was Trump who signed CISA into law that created this infrastructure to silence Americans. And we have to understand that I was the one who discovered that. You know, billions of people, 500 million people came to find out about our lawsuit. And I did it on my own. But people like Tucker Carlson, people like Elon Musk, people like Joe Rogan, and all of these other grifters concealed our lawsuit in the United States, but still we got the word out. And then they created a bogus lawsuit, mimicking mine, Chris, but purposely leaving out all the evidence of my lawsuit. And then they won in the federal court, this lawsuit, Missouri versus Biden. Then they won in the appeals court, but it was a very weak lawsuit. And I was wondering what the hell's going on. And I said, shit, they're going to take it up to the Supreme Court. They're going to lose there, and it's going to set a precedent. And the precedent was set 48 hours ago. The Supreme Court, 6-3 decision, they said that it is okay for the government to censor Americans through social media, period. We put this First Amendment 6 feet under. So the bottom line is that this question, as you observed, is attempting to falsely separate Trump and Biden. Both Trump and Biden are absolutely against democracy. It is Trump who signed into law CISA by unanimous consent of both wings of Congress. Let me repeat that. It was Donald Trump on November 16, 2018, who signed CISA into law, which created the censorship infrastructure against the American people on social media. Biden used that infrastructure. And then the Supreme Court protected that censorship. So think about it. Congress, the executive branch, and the judiciary all voted in favor to annihilate the First Amendment. They're all in it together, Chris. All of them. So these kinds of questions are creating a false separation. Therefore, the light-minded, to be, kind. Therefore, the people who think that these people are going to save themselves, or they're going to save them. The only people coming to save us is us. We must save ourselves. You must want to save yourself. And if you want to save yourself, then I'm the only leader among all of these people who's telling you that you must want to save yourself. And I'm the only leader giving you tools to do that. And those tools are understanding how these systems work. So if you're listening, you got to go to shattertheswarm.com and watch that video, because that video will educate all of you. And you will learn how the few control the 8 billion. You got to go watch that video. You got to go watch that video. And Chris, I just want to take a little break. I'm sure they're taking commercial breaks. And I want to play people this video that will inspire all of you to recognize that standing before you right now is the only leader that deserves to lead the working people of this country, because I am not here to save you. I'm not here with some jingle saying, make America great again, hope. No, the only way that we're going to win is you. You must want to realize that you want to save yourself. And do you want to learn how to fight back? If you want to do that, I will lead you to give you those tools. But if you're looking for me to be your savior from the clouds or to ask you for money to save you, that ain't going to happen. My message, Chris, is very simple. We have to bottoms up save ourselves, stand up on ourselves independently and interdependently, together, collectively. And the only way to do that is you must understand how systems work. So let me just play this video and we'll come right back, Chris, and wrap up. Does that make sense?
We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves. Because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you. Deep down inside that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to. And we need to all unite working people. There's only one movement that can do that. And that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution. And that's why I put this together. My goal is to train an army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours is what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people first with understanding what a system is, the dynamics of all systems that affect nature. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and truth.
Hey, Chris, is there double audio? Where's that double audio coming from?
I'm not sure. I'm muted.
Oh. Let me mute Trey. Okay, let me play it again.
We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves. Because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you. Deep down inside that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to. And we need to all unite working people. There's only one movement that can do that. And that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution. And that's why I put this together. My goal is to train an army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours is what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people first with understanding what a system is, the dynamics of all systems that affect nature. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems, fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Truth, freedom, health. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people who work united. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they've let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers, completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with is a part of this movement. We're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, you don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people to go local, fight locally. forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You've got to learn politics. And there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is a not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is the not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left one, Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something. Or Robert Kennedy. Scumbags. Or you're going to follow some right-wing talk show host. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. We're building a bottoms-up movement, and that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change. Bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done, and it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. You know, Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote-unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these four concepts I've built into a curriculum. People can go to truthfreedomhealth.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics. And I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. You need to get educated fast. And within a half an hour, I can teach people 2 years of MIT control systems. I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it. Anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. The Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on truthfreedomhealth.com, so people can sign in. They can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there. But we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to truthfreedomhealth.com.
All right, everyone. I think I figured out what that was, Chris. It was a reverb occurring from Suresh's presentation, which is a very weird thing. We haven't seen that before, so sorry about that. But the bottom line is, everyone, that our movement, My Run for President, is really about you. You have to really think in some fundamental way, do you want to save yourself, or do you want to outsource it to these clowns? And whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, or this really slippery deep state scumbag Booby Kennedy, you have to recognize that everything that they're doing is ask you for money, and they're going to do something for you. The only way out of this is us doing stuff for ourselves, and they have no interest in that. They want us to make us dependent. All right, Chris, I think you have a couple more. Yep.
I just want to say something real quick. Dr. Shiva is very unkind. What you said about Booby Kennedy. You said he had worms in his brain. What about those poor worms? Come on now.
Yeah, poor worms.
Poor worms. Imagine being stuck inside that guy.
Yep.
All right, we'll go to this one. What does Biden say to black voters who are disappointed he hasn't made more progress in their community since his first term? You might say, "You're if you don't like what I've done for you, you're not black." But go ahead.
Yeah. I think the first thing, Suresh, I think you have something else queued up, right? Which video is that, Suresh? Is that one, Suresh, have something? Yes, climate change. Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay. So look, here's the bottom line. If you look at the conditions of the average black person, they're worse today than before civil rights. That's what the reality is. And no one wants to talk about that. I'm talking about the economic conditions. The civil rights movement, it never really addressed the fundamental issues of infrastructure in the inner cities. Under the hijacking and putting forward Martin Luther King, not Malcolm X, and that was done by the Kennedys. What they did was they made the whole civil rights movement about quote unquote affirmative action, which was, you know, a reform, which was a Band-Aid solution to address the inequities that took place to Black people in this country. However, the reality was that the ultimate goal was to build infrastructure in the inner cities, and that never got done. And what the civil rights movement did was it pitted poor Blacks against poor whites. That's what fundamentally did take place. And if you look today, we've created a pencil-thin strata of bourgeois Blacks, the Oprah Winfreys, the Barack Obamas, you know, a few other people like that. And they're heralded as the, you know, the products of the civil rights movement and how great it was. Well, it's not true. What really happened was the civil rights movement was hijacked. And the fundamental issues of the conditions of poor Blacks as well as poor whites have not been addressed in the United States. And for that matter, the reality of racism, one wing of the establishment thinks that it's all resolved, right? It's all fixed, and the other wing of the establishment denies racism. The reality is racism does exist. And what is racism? It's putting people in their boxes and saying, if you're from the South and you're white, you must be a redneck. If you are a woman and you're blonde, you must be whatever, you know, you're not that bright, right? Or if you're an Indian, you must shake your head left to right and talk like this and want to be like Mahatma Gandhi, something like that, right? It's about putting people in boxes. This is a real racism. And as long as you stay in your boxes, it's okay. They like you. And the reality is none of these people, particularly the liberal white elites, have any idea what racism really is. They think you eliminate racism when you stop using the N-word. Well, that's not really true. So the question you're asking me about Biden is that the fundamental issues of infrastructure has not been addressed, Chris. And now poor whites' wages has come down by nearly 50%, while Blacks' wages has sort of stagnated for the last 50 years, you know? So there's a massive assault on working people in this country. And as I keep sharing in this graph, I, you know, probably will repeatedly keep sharing, what's fundamentally happened is that in the United States, we have a fundamental disregard for the working people in this country. And the goal is, like I keep saying, is to kill people. And the data is right in front of us. You can see it right here.
Bolivia remains at risk.